watching Channel Y. Channel Y, a South Asian Canadian channel.
And you're watching Channel Y.
The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media. Y Media. Y Media has newspaper, midweek, radio, South Asian Pulse.
Hi, I'm Amitabh Bachchan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
Hi, this is Amir Khan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
अब हर दिन सुने GTA का #1 रेडियो स्टेशन FM 91.9
Television. You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y.
Prime Minister, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Online, SouthAsianDaily.com. The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media.
This part of the program is brought to you by Midweek Newspaper, published every Tuesday.
Hello and welcome to The Editor's Take. I'm Ramona Singh and joining me in studio is Group Editor Yudhvir Jaswal. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Ramona ji. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And you know what? This week has been a very busy week, but one of our favorite streaming services, Netflix, which has been so popular during the pandemic, big news came out this week that their stock prices are down, their shares are down, they're bleeding customers. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they certainly had the first movers advantage because when Netflix came, as much as they're saying, the password thing, the inflation thing, and the rates, and they might want to bring in ads. These are all factors. I'm sure you're going to talk more about that as we move further. But being, running a media company, my take on this one is, when they came in first, they were the only ones, and after these blockbusters and you got to watch the movies in cinema halls, but this was another option. You watch your movie at your place at your own time. This was their biggest advantage, and they had bought so much of content. There was the massive content. You had the My List, and we were all trying to, despite binge watching, we were trying to catch up on our My List, and they had the position, the first movers advantage. But then came in other services, whether it was Prime, then you have Apple, then you have Disney app, then you have Z, then you have so many other streaming services. So I think the OTT service, area now, I would say it is almost saturated right now. So you have so many different options. So at one time it was okay, paying $5, $6, even $10 people would have paid if it was just one service. Now it's like the whole cable thing back over again. I mean, cable TV, why would you switch, cut the cable and go to Netflix? Why? Because cable is still costing you maybe 40, 50, 60, or the VIP packages go as high as $200 for that amount. So here came in Netflix for just a small amount of money, less than $10, you have all these massive things. And then suddenly all this competition came along, and then I think it was bound to happen. What do you say?
You're absolutely right. It did have the movers advantage and first movers advantage, and it's only going to be a time where the market will get saturated, and competition did that in due time. And essentially they lost 200,000 customers, and now they're projecting to lose in the first 3 months of this year, and now they're looking to lose another 2 million that they were looking, so their forecast was they're going to increase their subscriber share by 2 million, but now they're saying, no, actually, it's going to be minus 2 million. And some of the reasons they're saying is it's the competition like Hulu Plus and Star and all them. And they're saying it's inflation now that this year it's been inflation at a 30-year high, that people are now looking at, like, where do I cut costs, right? And now, for example, and also cinemas opening up again, right? Since the mandates have been, the lockdown have been lifted, people are actually happy to go to a cinema. And this is the case where some cinemas were playing movies that was sitting on the other streaming platforms, but people are still going in there because it's nice to go back to the pre-pandemic way of doing life. They're also saying potentially the war between Ukraine and Russia. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has a lot to do with it, and the sanctions that went on against Russia, essentially they were looking at 700,000 subscribers that was just removed from there. And then also they're saying some other reasons are a price increase, right? So as they increase their price, people are now actually looking at saying, if I have a subscription with all these other streaming providers, you're right, it's now the cost of cable, and then you're still not getting your news.
Yeah, and I think as much as they're talking about inflation, but then here's another part to that. Americans are spending more than ever. Canadians, again, the Stats Canada has clearly reported Canadians are spending more than ever. Third point that you just made, that people are going to watch movies in the cinema halls. Do you think cinema halls is going to cost anything less than you paying $5 or $10 at home? So I think there's another aspect. Being in media, this is what I've realized. Nobody can ever predict what the consumer is going to like, especially from the media perspective. You've seen big blockbuster movies, whether from Hollywood or Bollywood, fail miserably. You have all the big star cast, you have all the big budgets. It seems like it's going to be the biggest box office hit, and here it's a dud. Nothing happens. And then a small budget movie with not a massive star cast, it suddenly clicks. Audience say, wow, and you have to open up at more theaters, and it's a blockbuster. So nobody can really predict that. Same on social media as well. Here is a very interesting video which somebody would say, wow, this is such an interesting content, but it doesn't go viral. And here is a video which is so weird, and you would say, no, who's going to watch this video? And it goes viral. So this is what is happening with all these OTT platforms as well, whether it's Netflix, Amazon, or anything else, whether it's Disney, that they're not really able to figure out that what the audience will like. And another aspect is the appetite for more and more content, because if there is one thing which will rule, that is content for sure. That's how you're going to generate more and more eyeballs. So I think that is the key. You came up with the show Food for Thought. I know when you came up with this show Food for Thought, I'm sure you had some sort of planning behind it, but I doubt even you might have imagined it's going to be such a massive hit, you being the lead host for Food for Thought, you're the producer for that. What's your take on the media landscape and how the audience behaves? I want to listen to your viewpoint.
I think it's important to first have, when you have that goal in mind, what's your intention? And I think for that show, the intention was to connect with people on a heart level, on a soul level. And I think that's where the name also came from, Food for Thought. When we're, brainstorming, what do we call this type of content? That just came to mind. And even though it seemed like maybe not a great title, but it just felt so right. And I think the intention to be able to produce something good, put it out there, see what the feedback is, see if it's even helpful for people to, because it's always nice to have a friend you can talk to that can always give you good insight and good advice, and maybe from their own experiences they can draw, some of the challenges and the things that they went through that you can help you navigate for what you want to do. And for people who just, don't have that in their life, I think I want Food for Thought to be a place where they come to, and as if they're having a dialogue with a friend or a heart-to-heart, to be able to talk about or listen to some of that information. And what's great about, I think, about Y Media is that since there's such a great connection with the audience base, the audience is giving the feedback, so it's been positive so far, which is really nice to hear. But also, they can also say what do they want to hear? Where do they want things to go in terms of like content, right? But then it's then it is a conversation, even though it's through the screen.
Yeah, and let me ask you another question. Earlier when Netflix came, it almost became a synonym for OTT platforms, Netflix. But now with so many options, do you still go to Netflix all the time, or there are others as well?
Well, it's a good question, because I have Netflix and I have all the other different platform providers as well, streaming service providers. And Netflix was great because it had a massive library, and it was the only place you could go and you can watch it and not have to stream it from some other source that might be free but then has pop-ups and you don't know how safe it is. So it had a great library. Then it invested in Netflix originals. So now it's competing with like Hollywood studios that were producing movies and all the other companies that were producing different shows that would go on cable networks. So now they're at this, and with like top level stars, right? Like people that are headliners. So they really invested in their content. So it wasn't just like watching old stuff, right? They create a lot of content, but now pandemic is done, right? In terms of like, there's no lockdown where you could sit and binge watch something for like 5 hours, 10 hours. Now you got to go to work, right? Now you got to drive to your place of work. Kids are going back to school. Kids are back in school, right? You have all these other things to do. And so now you get onto Netflix and you're not going to binge watch, but maybe you'll watch a movie here and there. and then you're thinking like, okay, but now your other favorite shows, which Hulu did really well, like they have two versions. You pay, you know, a less amount, like a $4.99 for watching ads, which is really like watching TV, but you're used to it, just like how you listen to radio in your car, you're gonna listen to ads, right? And so, you know, but then they found that when they looked at the revenues, Hulu makes more money from subscribers that are gonna pay less and watch the ads than the ones that pay a little more and get no ads. And Netflix's vision was no ads. This is the best way. And yes, it did work for some time, but now people are looking, you know, and since some of my favorite shows are sitting on other platforms, now I am paying, I think when I calculate, around $70 on just fees to different streaming service providers. And I'm like, what's going on? You know, this was an alternative to cable. And so now they're thinking about password sharing, coming up with a minor fee so people can, you know, if they want to share a password from different IP addresses, they can pay a minor fee, not the full cost, because they've estimated that they're losing, there's like 100 million subscribers they could have if everybody had to have a password of their own. So that's a big revenue loss, although Netflix is still very profitable. Revenue-wise, they're good, but now looking at what does that mean, and then of course now with ads, if they include that, do they get to now increase the price and have what Hulu's doing well, which is lower price with ads, but you pay a higher fee with no ads?
Yeah, I think it's a catch-22 situation for them because when you have ads, because once you get used to why you love watching the movie experience in a cinema hall, of course it's a big screen, that's point number one. Yeah. Second is there is no interruption at all. It's not the cable TV where you have the networks putting in some ads. So once you get used to of watching content without ads, I doubt people will be even paying lower price, but then it might work to your advantage, as you rightly said, so that there are millions of customers who are still watching with the password sharing, but with the ad thing, that might be covered.
That might be covered, and when you look at other streaming services, they're making money from people who are willing to watch ads, right? That's where a majority of their revenue growth is coming from. So hey, it works, but it's you know, it's a challenging time as things are changing, and we'll be right back with a brand new topic on Editor's Take.
You are watching Channel Y, Channel Y, a South Asian Canadian channel.
And you're watching Channel Y.
The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media. Y Media has newspaper, midweek, radio, South Asian Pulse.
Hi, I'm Amitabh Bachchan, and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
Hi, this is Amir Khan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
अब हर दिन सुने GTA का #1 रेडियो स्टेशन FM 91.9
Television. You are watching Channel Y.
Prime Minister, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Online, SouthAsianDaily.com. The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media.
This part of the program is brought to you by Midweek Newspaper, published every Tuesday.
Hello everyone, my name is Jadoo. I'm the group editor at Y Media. Welcome to Editor's Take, and I have the associate editor, Ramona Singh, with me. Ramona ji, a very warm welcome. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and as much as there are many medias who would shy away from certain topics which they find contentious, we've seen some riots in Sweden recently, and precisely the reason for that was one of the right-wing politicians. He did organize an event, which I think he streamed live as well, where he was burning a religious textbook. As much as we may not agree with him, but then there were protests and they turned violent. This is not the first time we've seen people who are opposing or who are protesting against any acts of which they see as offending them because of religious reasons, but they turn into violent protest in Sweden, in Norway, in other parts of Europe. We've seen that, and of course we've seen that in South Asia, in India, in Pakistan as well. My question is freedom of speech an absolute thing? Because where do we draw the line? Because there is one section of the society which says that for freedom of expression, for freedom of speech, you could talk about all these things, and it's a constitutional right. You can burn a textbook, and this is freedom of expression. As long as the constitutional right is given, they can do that. But there is another constituency which has a counterclaim that no, you cannot offend anybody, you cannot hurt anybody's religious feelings to that extent that it can incite hatred or it can incite violence. So there are two sides of the story. What's your take on this one?
I think that when it comes to is freedom absolute, there's no such thing as absolute, right? Even our life is not absolute. So there's always barriers and boundaries to what is, how you can have your freedom and how you can still not be able to infringe on other people's freedoms, right? So in this case, in this specific scenario where you had this politician who was burning religious books, I mean, what's dangerous there is because when a politician is somebody who's elected and who's deemed to be a leader of that society, of that community, when they're doing something, they're essentially saying this is okay, continue to do it, and maybe the message indirectly will be now instead of, burning books, now you can harm the people who believe in those books that you're burning, right? Those religious texts who identify with that religion. There is a lot of harm there in terms of what it could stipulate. What we saw, for example, right now, which is in the courts, which is when Donald Trump was, president, and he tweeted out, when it came to the election results against Biden, saying that they're not accurate and the election was stolen from him. And then you saw the riots that happened on Capitol Hill on early January when they were trying to give out the results. And so when you do have people in a position who have the office, right, and who are elected, they have a higher threshold of what they should be able to put out there, and there's a lot of onus on them to have that responsibility. But an average person, if they want to purchase a book or anything for that matter, and they feel like they want to burn it, destroy it, throw it out, and put it on camera while they do it, to display it on their social media, I believe they have the freedom to do that because that's something that they're doing in the privacy of their own space, and I don't think you can actually arrest them for it because they haven't killed anybody, they haven't broken any law, because their constitutional freedom allows them to be able to have their religious views. Now, if we do make it illegal, for example, then you have to identify what religions count in that legality, right? There's a lot of new religions. Does that mean now all those textbooks or videos or whatever the foundation of that religion is based on in terms of distributing the content, now do we keep updating those laws? So there's a lot to debate here.
Yeah, and then I'm bringing another perspective to this discussion over here. As much as I agree with you that yes, we have to act very, very responsible, because in my opinion, why get to a point of disrespecting somebody? I think we should be very mindful if people believe in a religious textbook and there are millions and millions of followers for all the religions, or even if there is just one follower. Now, to your point, that even if there is one person who's following any new religion, there is one person, there's just one follower and he follows a new religion, and they create a religious textbook, they also have a textbook. Why even offend that one person? Let's not offend. We should be very mindful of each other's feelings. Let's not hurt anybody's feelings. This is one part. The second point that I want to discuss over here is that just in case someone goes that far, that they disrespect any religious book, my viewpoint would be that if he does that, the max, this is the max, although I may not be even doing that. In my case, I will not be even doing that. But the maximum limit could be, I can go and talk to that guy in a very polite way and ask him, sir, you know what, this is our religious textbook and why would you disrespect that? If there is any issue, let's discuss, let's have a discussion on this one. This is the max. But I won't go till that extent that you have disrespected my religious textbook, so I'm going to turn violent. No. There is no place for violence in a civilized society. Let me talk about the civilized society and the constitution first. There is no place for violence. Second point, which religious textbook says that I give you the right that you go and do the vigilante justice or take revenge on my behalf? Who gave you that? Show me. I doubt most of the religious textbooks would not talk about vendetta or revengeful feeling. the very essence of religion or all the religious textbook is love, compassion, and most importantly forgiveness. These are the basic things. So if anybody is disrespecting the religious textbook, I have to ask all these questions to myself. And just one last point, and then I'll hear your viewpoint as well. We all disrespect our religious textbook in a certain way. This is strictly my opinion. How we do that? When we speak lies, are we not disrespecting our religious textbook? When we're speaking lies, when we're talking in an abusive language, imagine people using abusive language and getting violent, that you have disrespected our religious textbook. You are using abusive language, you are getting violent. Show me any religious leader, show me any religious textbook which says, go ahead, use abusive language, beat others, turn violent because they have disrespected my religious textbook. You know, I can't really get it. Your take.
You're absolutely right. I think the main thing there is God doesn't have an ego, so God does not get offended if I'm talking about the God or the entity that you worship or the greater power for that specific religion. They're not going to get offended. They don't have human emotions of being offended with their ego or wanting vengeance. These are human emotions, right? They're not spiritual emotions. And so, no, that's not a thing where your God is expecting you to go do any of that stuff, right? Because your feelings are not fathomable in that level of your Creator. The Creator's far beyond all these things. And your relationship with your God and through your religious textbook of what you practice to have that spiritual connection with your God is between you and them. What someone else is doing was not going to detract from that. It's not going to minimize your relationship, your connection to your God if they, abuse the textbook that you think is holy, right? So one doesn't take away from the other, and no, the higher power does not tell you to go and kill others, because everybody else is also from the same soul, from the same connection in terms of we're all interconnected. We come from the same place. So if I were to harm you, then it doesn't justify that because I say, oh look, I'm more religious because I'm harming you. No, if anything, you've missed the point of what religion is and what creation is and how we're all human beings here we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, and we're still trying to find our way, but it doesn't take away from that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that point, that yes, religion is all about love, compassion, and forgiveness. I doubt there is any place for any vendetta, any revengeful feeling, or any violence in any religion. Please.
Well, what I'm essentially saying is that your religion is your personal relationship with what you believe in. What someone else does doesn't take away from what your beliefs are and your connection to your Creator. That is something that they have to deal with on their own, whether they're experiencing hard times, mental health issues, whatever prejudices or discriminatory ideas they have. Those are their challenges. It doesn't take away from me.
Very nicely put. Very nicely put. I doubt we have too much time, but let's and this is a whole different topic we'll talk about someday later. But I'll try to squeeze in this point as well. Do you think integration has a role to play? Because we come in these Western societies. Why we choose to live in these Western societies as much as we were living in our own countries of origin, but when we come to this Western world, I think these people are a lot more liberal. These people do not have that sort of hypocrisy, if I may, for lack of a better word, that yes, on one side they claim that we are very religious, but here we see in these Western worlds, whether they're filing their tax returns and so many other things, they're making sure they stop on a stop sign, and they're very courteous. Mostly they're very honest. They're helping with each other. They're embracing the new immigrant societies. So are we doing well in terms of integration? That these are Western values. Western values are not watching, Boston Red Sox game or having a cup of Starbucks. These are certainly not Western values. It's just a way of life. But Western values are whom we should embrace. Canadian values are, what do you say?
Absolutely. I think what's fantastic about Canada, and I can speak about growing up in Canada, I came here when I was 9 years old and came from, a country that was going through war. And so when you come here and you're now sitting in class with kids from other countries, from other parts of the world, whereas, it's your friend, if you were back home and if that friend was from a friends and you would never go to their home and see how they live and how similar you are, how you have similar parents that want the best for their children, and what are the differences like when it comes to cuisine and when it comes to certain practices. But the rest is like a human is a human who experiences sadness, happiness, all the different ranges of emotions, who has dreams and aspirations. So I think what's fantastic about Canada is because it gives us the chance to see other cultures without having to actually go to those countries to see those cultures, right? And finding common ground and really understanding there is no difference, because we're all human beings at the end of the day. And then there is the Bill 21 that says, hey, let's take it to another level where we just remove religious identities that we, especially in the place of government and public service. So then there's that to that extreme, and saying, well, what's the middle ground? How do you integrate, but not to the point where you're losing your identity or what you think is part of your identity?
Yeah, you're right. I think we have to have a middle ground where we are retaining our heritage, our culture, and I don't have to change my name from Jadoo to something else just to please someone. I have my original name, I retain my original heritage, culture and everything, but on a similar token, I'm very well integrated, very well accepted in the society at large. I think we need to have a middle ground. I wish we had more time, but I'm sure we're going to talk more about this in our coming programs. And Monaji, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Keep watching Channel Y. That's all the time that we have today. Thank you.
You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y.